Howard, can you hear me?
Guys, I'll tell you how this came about. Several years ago, and I can't remember how many years. And Jason, let me say, I can only see you now, Jason. So if something goes wrong or something, just holler at me and get my attention.
Okay.
Several years ago, Dean Albin, who is the Scottish Rite membership chair in D.C. at the Temple in D.C., he has they have a way on their computer, and it slips my mind right now, the search engine. They can type in like Jacksonville and do a 25, 50, 75, 100, 200 mile search of Scottish Rite Masons. And if they see something out of the unusual that looks weird, like someone who is a member of a valley in North Dakota that lives in 5 miles of Jacksonville, they will contact, in our case, they'd contact Billy Deal, and he would make a touch base with them. Because there's a lot of people, sojourners, that travel all over the world, the United States, and they just pay their dues and they're not active. And it may be a chance to get someone active in your local chapter. So Dean was just messing around and did a search, I don't know how wide, on Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And up popped Jack Lucas, who is a member of the Valley of Newburgh. So it piqued an interest with Dean, and he did like he'd been doing. He called Jack, and they struck up a conversation, and lo and behold, Jack Lucas is a Medal of Honor recipient. And one thing led to another, and then eventually Ron Seal, the then Grand Commander, sent a plane ticket to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for Jack and his bride, and brought them to DC and made him a KCCH on site. And if he'd lived 4 more years, he'd have got the 33rd. But that's how we came to find out that Jack Lucas was who he is and what he is and where he's from. We also had, during that time, unfortunately, it was after Jack died, because he died shortly after this, that this was discovered. We had a reunion, Scottish Rite reunion, and named it the Jack Lucas Reunion. And his brother came. And I always tell this when I tell this story. I think most of y'all know Frankie Eubanks, a member of Zion Lodge. Frankie worked with Jack's brother, Ed, on the base at Cherry Point. Well, after that reunion, Ed walked up to Frankie and gave him a present. And the present was Jack Lucas Masonic ring, which Frankie wears today, which I would die for. And I've made Frankie swear to put it in his will that if something happens to him, I'll get that ring. But anyway, that's who we're talking about today, Jack Lucas. And this happened in Iwo Jima. There's a picture of Iwo Jima, the post flag raising that everybody is familiar with. Iwo was one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. We had an invasion force of 70,000 Marines on that invasion, and there was 21,000 Japanese. All but 200 of those Japanese were killed. We had 7,000 Marines were killed in those 5 days of bloodshed, and we had over 25,000 casualties. Jack Harrell was an American Marine in World War II who was awarded the Medal of Honor at the age of 17 as a private first class in the Marine Corps during the Battle of Iwo Jima. Jack was born 14 February 1928 in Plymouth, North Carolina, and died on 5 June 2008. I think everybody knows where Plymouth is. If you go to Washington and turn right, you'll eventually or go to Williamston and turn right, you'll eventually run into Plymouth on 264, a small town. He was the youngest Marine to be awarded the Medal of Honor. And if you look at him, he does have a baby face. I was talking the other night about Aldi Murphy. I did a talk at the Zion, my lodge, about Aldi Murphy. And one of the things I talked about was Aldi also was only 5'8". And in case I would think all of y'all would know, but Aldi Murphy was the most decorated serviceman in World War II, including the Medal of Honor, obviously. But he was only 5'8", and Jack was 5'8", and Jay Collins, director of the work, said, who is probably about 5'8", said, "Johnny, what's the deal with you saying stuff about 5'8"? You know, they can do things too." And the thing about it is, we have an expectation. I guarantee you, if you went to talking to someone that was not familiar with this, and you told them the exploits of Jack or Audie Murphy, and say, what size do you think we're? Most people are going to say probably 6'1" or 6'2" and 230, 240, but these short guys can do stuff too. But you can see he does have a baby face. And his mom did something real cruel. She named him Jacqueline, which was not a good name. It's sort of like a boy named Sue. Diving on a live hand grenade to save your friends is one of the most selfless, heroic acts of valor that any human being can perform. It takes a special, rare kind of person to come literally face to face with your own destruction and resist every natural impulse of self-preservation and unhesitatingly give yourself up in a final, purely selfless feat of bravery, trading in the most precious thing a human has to offer, their life, so that others might live. It's such a paragon of ultimate selfless human sacrifice that nowadays it's the standard go-to analogy for everything. It's such a heroic testament to the will of the human spirit that more medals of honor and Victoria Crosses have been handed out for this single act than for any other deed in the history of combat. There's an aerial shot of Iwo Jima, and Surles is down in the lower left-hand corner, the mountains down in the lower left-hand corner. It's not real mountainous other than Surles, but it's sort of flat. And that aerial shot does not give you, it's actually bigger than that makes it think it is. Why was it important? It's 750 miles from Japan, mainland Japan. And we couldn't leave Hawaii in the 40s and fly all the way. So it was strategic for a landing base to land and refuel. So that's why it was so important. Ended up, unfortunately, it was never used for that. Of course, you got to remember this was near the end of the war when we finally captured it. And there it is. That gives you an idea of there are, I'm an old boy from Eastern North Carolina. Those are mountains back there in the background, but that definitely is a mountain. Most people would say that's not a mountainous area there other than the Mount Surles. Some of the most fierce fighting in the history of combat was done on this island. Of course, there's what everybody remembers from Iwo Jima. Unfortunately, despite being a universally acknowledged feat of righteous, heroic awesomeness, the fact that the entire action is over in 3 to 5 seconds, combined with some horrifically tragic consequences for the hero, to make grenade hopping a pretty tough subject to talk about. Unless, of course, we're talking about Jack Lucas, I can't read, you're in my way there, Jason, but 26 Marines. Jack not only jumped on one, but he jumped on 2 grenades and lived to talk about it. Jack Lucas was born on Valentine's Day, 1928, in Plymouth, a rural town in North Carolina with a very small population. And like I said, of course, one of the most terrible first names in history, Jacqueline, did the boy named Sue thing and spent his entire life training to be so ungodly hardcore that anyone who referred to him by any other name other than Jack would end up needing a trip to the ER. He eventually enlisted as a cadet at Edwards Military Institute in Salemburg, which is near Clinton, which is now the North Carolina Justice Academy. Things were going pretty good for a while, but Jack's life changed dramatically in December 7th, 41. When he got news that a super secret sneak attack of Japanese fighter bombers had just destroyed the American battleship fleet at Pearl into a towering inferno of twisted metal. Jack, at 13 years old, brothers, took this personally. His 13-year-old classmates were running around their school doing teenage boy stuff like putting M80s in the public toilets and super gluing their friends' lockers together. Lucas got mad. Not just mad, but super mad. He had one thing. He stormed out of the military school. He had one thing in mind. He wanted to kill Japs. And this, when he stormed out of military school, when he left Edwards, this was the first of many times he went AWOL during his career. He went across the border into Virginia and bribed a notary public to swear he was 17 and he had forged his mom's signature. He hitched a ride to the nearest Marine Corps recruiting station, marched his hefty 5'8", 200-pound frame through the front door like he owned the place with his forged mom's signature on the enlistment paperwork, and shipped out to Paris Island for the Marine Corps boot camp. Keep in mind, 10 months earlier, this kid was 12 years old, brothers. As I said, he had one thing in mind. He said over and over, I just want to kill Japs. He went through the most intense basic training in the United States military has to offer and was made a Marine at 14 years old. And was subsequently assigned to machine gunner school at Camp Lejeune. He was so good at this, when his class received orders to leave, he was selected to stay there as an instructor. To someone who wanted to kill Japs, that was not a good thing, and it didn't set very well with him. Matter of fact, he was ticked off. As his friends packed to board a train in California, he packed what little bit of clothes he could get in an AWOL bag, and he got on the train with them on a ride to California. When he got to California, and of course he was AWOL. When he got to California and the sergeant in the lineup was calling out the names, he was left standing there. When he didn't see his name on the list that they had, the paperwork, Jack convinced the sergeant it was a clerical order error, and he was supposed to be stationed on the front lines in combat arms role. This didn't work out too good for him either. He was made a truck driver at the Marine Corps base. They let him stay there, filled out the paperwork. They thought it was a mistake, administrative mistake. His unit was eventually relocated to Pearl Harbor, and to add insult to injury, not only was he assigned a truck driver, it was a trash truck. This didn't set too well with him either. Unsatisfied by his current status of not blowing the mess out of the enemy at all corners wherever he could find them, and denied in all his requests, every week he put in a request to go to the front lines. Jack spent the next couple of years raising heck across Honolulu. He was arrested many times for drunken bar fights. He was disciplined for going AWOL so he could head into town and meet girls. He was busted by the military police for walking through the barracks one night with a case of beer. Then he was subsequently arrested for punching that same MP in the face when the MP tried to take his beer away from him. One night, while coming back from a drunken rage in Honolulu, he saw men on Liberty ships were being shuttled out to the ships in Higgins boats. As one boatload prepared to leave the dock, he decided he was going to war. Jack sauntered on board like he knew what he was doing. A Marine told him they were the 5th Division Marines on ship. He got off at the first ship and followed the Marines up the gangway, saluted, and stepped on board APA 160, the USS Duel. He asked about his cousin, Oliver Lucas, who went by the name Sam, and was told that that was his ship. Now, what were the odds of him getting on a ship that his cousin was on? What a lucky move. Eventually, his cousin found him. He then went on to spend a month living off crumbs and hiding from officers because they were to send him back to Hawaii to be court-martialed. Now, he waited till they got way out to sea. I can't remember how many weeks it was, but he waited till he got out to sea because he knew it was 29th day at sea. They knew they wouldn't turn him around and carry him back. The next day, the Duel weighed anchor, headed to parts unknown. They had no idea where they were going. He was easily assorted into the hundreds of men on board, and Sam and other sailors hid him for 30 days. And in 30 days, he'd be AWOL and listed as a deserter, and he didn't want this. Thinking they were far too out to sea to return him, he decided to inform the ship's officers. On 8 February 1945, he turned himself in to Captain Robert Dunlap. Remember that name. Captain Dunlap was in charge of the ship. It was his 29th day at sea. He escorted him to Lieutenant Colonel Dan Pollock's quarters and confessed to what he had done and awaited judgment. The colonel told him, "Young fellow, you're causing me a whole lot of administrative trouble, but I sure wish I had a whole boatload of men that wanted to fight as bad as you do." Captain Dunlap asked him where to assign him, and he was assigned to the first 26, his cousin's outfit. Now, for some reason, Dunlap, after they left the colonel's office, took him to the bow of the deck and had a photographer take a picture of the two of them. Little did this photographer know that he was taking a picture of, within the next 2 weeks, a picture of two, not one, but two Medal of Honor recipients. On February the 20th and 21st February 1945 on Iwo Jima, Captain Robert Dunlap crawled for more than 200 yards forward of the lines to spot enemy placements. He remained forward for 2 nights, calling in artillery fire. 5 days later, he was cut down by a rifle round to the hip. He survived his fighting, but his fighting days were over. He received the Medal of Honor for this heroic deed. The order came at 6:30 a.m., land to landing crafts. The boats were loaded. Jack hit the beach at 1500 hours. The first problem was, keep in mind, Jack was 5'8". This beach had been bombed continuously for about a week by our artillery. And it was being raked with heavy artillery fire. The first thing Jack done when he came off that ship was went to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. 5'8", he fell in a crater hole and almost drowned. He lost his weapon. The beach was being raked with heavy artillery and anti-aircraft weapons. Landmines were everywhere. Bodies were being blown apart. Lifeless bodies of Marines tumbled in the surf, washing up on the beach like driftwood. Red Beach, as it was referred to, was true to its name. Your life expectancy when the front of that landing craft went down was 10 seconds, from 63 years to 10 seconds. Of the 40,000 Marines who hit the beach at Iwo Jima on about February the 20th, 1945, 17-year-old Private Jack Lucas of the 1st Battalion, 26th Marines, 5th Marine Division was the only infantryman who assaulted the beach without a weapon. He lost his weapon when he sunk to the bottom of the Pacific. He recovered and changed that pretty quickly, grabbed one off a dead man in the surf, racked the slide, and charged in the battle. Rushing through the brutal, endless curtains of strafing machine gun and artillery fire that raked the beach, Lucas grabbed his newly acquired weapon and charged ahead. Undaunted by the explosions and bullets zipping all around him. Let me stop again. Guys, this guy's 14 years old. 14 years old. He ran ahead, reached the relative safety of the tree line, and fell in with a 4-man fire team that had already started working their way through the jungle, trying to clear out one of the most tenacious and ferociously hardcore enemies the United States had ever faced. Forces that invaded the island on February the 19th and the ensuing battle of Iwo Jima lasted for 5 weeks, some of the bloodiest fighting of World War II. And like I said, all but 200 of the 21,000 Japanese were killed. These tunnels, or not tunnels, these ravines like you see there on the right were all over the island. And they're dug in, the island is a volcano. So that's volcanic ash and volcanic rock that you see there. Well, they're making their way through a ravine, fighting every step of the way when some bad stuff started to go down. It turned out the Japanese had dug this ridiculously intricate series of caverns and secret passages that ran through the entire island. So Lucas, just as Lucas and his buddies thought they were going to launch their final assault on a Japanese machine gun nest, which they were trying to get to, they came to the horrible realization that all 11 men in that pillbox had gone into a tunnel, crawled underneath them, and popped up directly behind the Marines. Marines turned to fire, and Jack Lucas, much awaited first moments of real combat, in his first round went through the helmet of an enemy soldier, almost hitting him, the barrel of the gun almost hitting the enemy in the forehead, killing him on the spot, who was standing on a rifle barrel length from him. Unfortunately, Jack's second round jammed in the rifle. I guess that's what happens when you pick up rifles from an acre deep water on blood-soaked sandy beaches. At this point, Jack saw the live hand. When he looked down at his gun, he saw the live hand grenade that just landed at his feet. He screamed "grenade" and jumped on top of it, screaming for the other Marines to take cover. At this time, a second enemy grenade landed within arm's reach. Jack reached and grabbed it and pulled it, jamming it under his body. The Type 97 fragmentation grenade is a 16-ounce metal ball stuffed with 65 grams of TNT and a 5-second time detonation mechanism. Now, a common misconception about hand grenades is that they create some kind of huge fiery explosion that blows people in the next area code, like they're launched out of a flaming death catapult. Then they proceed to ignite everything in the general vicinity, up to and including the Earth's atmosphere. While the explosive power unleashed by a frag grenade is certainly not the sort of thing you want to wake up to every morning, what kills a majority of people isn't the bomb, but the tremendous amount of shrapnel. That's what it looked like. And as all of you guys well know, every one of these pineapples, for lack of another word, which is filled with junk inside, explodes and goes into your body. That's what it looks like, more likely like that.
Johnny,
go ahead.
Johnny, real quick, we can't see your slides. Well, I can't. So.
Okay, when's the last time you've seen one?
I haven't seen one yet, but just
okay.
keep going.
Agreed. I haven't seen any slides, but
okay.
Send them after
just
the
keep
fact.
going at this point.
Okay. Basically, the explosion is just a catalyst that shatters the metal outside of the grenade and sends tens of thousands of tiny razor-sharp metal splinters hurling through the air in every direction, shredding everything in their wake and killing and maiming anyone or anything within 100 to 150 feet. You ever wonder why some grenades look like pineapples? That's why. It's not pretty. And Jack Lucas just had 2 of those grenades blow up straight in his torso. Sure, his friend survived thanks to his heroism, but all the metal does go somewhere, and most of it went straight into Jack's body. Jack remembers he never lost consciousness, guys. He remembers going up in the air approximately 10 feet, and all was quiet. He could say he could hear a pin drop. There was no pain. He landed on his right arm and looked for his right arm, and it was underneath him. He thought it had been blown off. But then he said the most horrible, intense, undescribable pain he had ever experienced hit him. He could taste the blood as it filled his mouth. He raised his head to look down at his body and saw a geyser of blood spurting from his left leg. He thought, I've just survived 2 hand grenades, and I'm going to die by bleeding to death. Jack had always been a mama's boy, and at this time, guys, he was 45 years from becoming a master mason. Let me repeat that. When this happened, he was 45 years before he was raised to be a master mason. At this time, Jack said in his book, he looked down at his leg and he said, I didn't think of my mom. I didn't think of my dad. I didn't think of my brother. I thought of in whom I put my trust. He looked back down and the bleeding had stopped. The rest of the Marine fire team, thinking he was dead and pumped up by his bravery and the fact that they weren't currently all dead, proceeded to fight like demons and push the Japanese back, driving them from position and capturing the sector. When they came back to take the dead dog tags off their fallen brother that they were sure were dead because they saw what happened, they noticed that not only was he alive, but he was actually conscious. And he spit on them. The only thing he could move, he spit on them to get their attention. They called for medics. While taking Jack down the mountain, the medics dropped Jack and split his head open on the volcanic rock. Another time he thought he was dead. They laid him on the beach, and when the other medics got to him and they began putting him in a plastic bag, again he had to spit on them to get them to realize that he was alive. They put him on a gurney, took him out to a boat, and guess what happened as they're lifting him up to put him on the boat? Straight to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean again. The true unsung heroes, as many of you know in Iwo Jima, were the Navy corpsmen. They were called in on the spot, hauling the severely messed up Lucas out there on a stretcher while simultaneously using their 45s to fight off Japanese banzai counterattacks. They throttled through the war zone, got Lucas to a hospital ship. 21 surgeries for them to remove 200 features of shrapnel from every major organ in his body. But 7 months later, 14-year-old Jack Lucas personally walked up to Harry Truman and received his Medal of Honor in person. He made a complete recovery. I'm sorry, he was 6 days past his 17th birthday, the youngest Marine ever to receive the award. After the war, Lucas went home and fulfilled his promise to his mother to finish school. Get this, guys. First day he went to the 9th grade, he went with his Medal of Honor hung around his neck. He finished college, went on a USO speaking tour, and was married 3 times, and survived his second wife's attempt to hire a hitman to murder him. She hadn't gotten the message from the Japanese that this guy was impervious to conventional weapons. And then at age 40, he decided to get over his fear of heights by enlisting in the United States Army and was assigned to the 82nd Airborne as a paratrooper. Brothers, on his first jump, his chute failed to open. As his team leader astutely pointed out, he was the first one out of the plane, the last one out of the plane, and the first one on the ground. He fell 3,500 feet through the air without a parachute and attempted a commando roll just as he was about to spat on the earth like a Wile E. Coyote style. He not only lived, but he walked away unscathed. 2 weeks later, he went back and made it and completed the second jump. His adventures is miraculously surviving death now complete. He ran a successful business outside of D.C., wrote an appropriately named autobiography titled Indestructible, and met every president from Truman to Clinton. Had his original Medal of Honor citation laid out in the hull of the USS Iwo Jima, and he died in 2008 at the age of 80 of cancer, of all things. I'm going to read you his Medal of Honor citation. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life and above and beyond the call of duty, serving with the 1st Battalion, 26th Marines, 5th Marine Division during action against the enemy Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, Volcanic Islands, 20 February 1945, while creeping through a treacherous, twisting ravine which ran in close proximity to a fluid and uncertainty front line on D+1 day. Private First Class Lucas and 3 other men were suddenly ambushed by a hostile patrol which savagely attacked with rifle fire and grenades. Quick to act when the lives of the small group were endangered by 2 grenades which landed directly in front of them, PFC Lucas unhesitatingly hurled himself over his comrades upon one grenade and pulled the other under him, absorbing the whole blasting force of the explosion in his own body in order to shield his companions from the concussion and murderous flying fragments. By his inspiring action and valiant spirit of self-sacrifice, he not only protected his comrades from certain injury or possible death, but also enabled them to rout the Japanese patrol and continue to advance. His exceptionally courageous initiative and loyalty reflect the highest credit upon PFC Lucas and the United States Naval Service. And I wish you could see the picture there. I know you can't, but it's an old bald-headed old timer with his USMC coat on, windbreaker jacket with his medal hung around his neck. I was fortunate enough to sit in a lodge with a brother, and Howard, I know you would know this guy. Matter of fact, he was the last at Grand Lodge. He was awarded the Montford Medal. He's from down east, and his name just slipped me. But he was sitting in lodge with Jack the night he was raised. And when they asked Jack if he had anything to say, this Medal of Honor recipient stood up and said, "This tonight is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me." The end.
Good job, Johnny.
Thank you.
No doubt. That's amazing.
Great job,
And
Johnny.
Johnny, when we had that reunion in his honor that night, I think I read his biography at dinner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an easy read. So if anybody wants to.
I actually texted my dad through all this, and he's like in tears.
Yeah. It's get the book Indestructible. It's like Howard said, you can read it in 2 hours, 3 hours. It's a short thing, but it's got a lot of information on it. He was a rounder, no doubt. He was a hellraiser, and
For sure. 13 years old. Holy
man. Yeah. When the writer, which was a female, came, Ed said that Jack would stay gone for 2 years. He'd never hear a phone call, nothing, and then all of a sudden, a knock at the door, and there stood Jack. And he said this day, he was knocking at the door, and he opened the door, and there stood Jack and this beautiful woman and this another man. And Jack said, "Ed, she wants to talk to you." So they came in and sat down, and they got to talking, and she obviously asked Ed a lot of questions. When they finally got through after several hours, she said, "Anything else you want to say?" And Ed looked at her and looked at the guy that was with him and said, "Are you with her?" And the guy said, "Yeah, that's my wife." He said, I would advise you to stay with her as long as he's around. He was a rounder, and like I said, if you Google, and it'd be worth Googling and find that picture, that last picture that I show up there. He's
I
good on
will.
that windbreaker, and you can look at him and tell he's just a hell raiser. But
That's
everybody
hilarious.
that's met him, Dean Allman told me, and everybody that I've talked to that's ever met him said he's not what he personifies. He's just a cool guy, do anything in the world for you. He went to schools all over Baton Rouge and gave talks and did things like that.
Connie,
Correct me if I'm wrong, brothers. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
you mentioned that Audie Murphy was 5'8" also. Audie Murphy was also a Mason.
Yep, sure was. 33rd.
Wow.
Brothers, if there's nothing else at this point, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Motion to adjourn.
Thanks again, Johnny.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Johnny,
Thank you,
thank you
Johnny.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Johnny.
Yes, sir.